So I've been meaning to do a guide for Documint for a while now, and if you're a complete beginner, you've never used Documint before, but you want to get started, and you want to get started fast, this is the video for you. If you're new here, hi, my name is Alex, and on this channel we talk about anything and everything low-code, automations, Documint, and a whole bunch of other things. You basically name it, we do it. So without any further ado, let's get started. All right, so let's kick things off in order of importance. We have our database, we have a blank make scenario, we have a blank document template, and last but not least, we also have our design doodle, I would call it. It kind of gives us the idea of what we want to build. And usually, like, our clients would provide something like this, you know, like sketch on a napkin or something like that, where they kind of tell us what their paperwork should look like. And as you can see, the idea here is that we want to have like this logo, confirmation, some client details, the order line items, the total price, and the order notes. You could start with a document template, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's healthier to actually do this from scratch so that you can learn something along the way versus tweaking something that already exists. Okay, so now my personal philosophy is to build on strength. In other words, I want to achieve small things and like build on top of them. So instead of building out the template and like trying to make it look as close as possible to the goal, I want to just first achieve some basic things like add the logo, add the order number, and add today's date. And I can see that there's also a bar. Let's see if we can achieve that and get the file from Documint and push it to Airtable. So first things first, we need to deal with the trigger. So the first thing I need to do is grab a webhook, custom webhook, create a webhook, save, copy, okay. And then I'm just going to jump into automations, create a new trigger. And actually, before I do that, I probably need to jump into my order because that's where I'm going to be triggering from. So let's just call this create paperwork, checkbox, create a field, create paperwork. That is now checked, automations. And when the record matches those conditions, in other words, my order has that check mark, there we go, I will then trigger my trusted script. So here we go. Let's just paste that webhook and then just paste the script. Here we go. I'm going to take that webhook, put it over here. The next thing that I want to do is actually add my input variables. So record ID, and then the value is going to be my Airtable record ID. There we go. Finish editing, turn this on, go back to data, get my webhook to start listening because I want to make sure that Airtable and make communicate to each other. Uncheck, recheck. Let's see if we can get a payload. Excellent, we can. So my next move is to actually fetch that record from Airtable. I want to make sure that everything's cool and we can actually get some data to populate at Documint. And we're going to start building the document template in just a few seconds, but I just want to set this up very quickly. So here we go, get a record. Here we go. So I know that this particular record ID comes from my orders table. Therefore, when I'm mapping this, I need to make sure that I pick the orders table and then just map this in. Here we go. Press OK. Let's run this again. And I want you to notice how I'm testing every single step, every single new thing that I add. I run another test just to make sure that everything is going to plan. And as you can see, it is, since I'm basically getting the data over here from Airtable, and I'm also kind of like seeing everything that I can fetch for the order. Now, let's deal with actually setting up the template in Documint. Okay, so here's that blank template. The first thing that I usually do is I name it because I want to find it later on. So let's just call this order paperwork V1. Excellent. Now that we've named it, it's important to notice that saving changes thing that you saw. It's important to make sure that always all the changes are saved, and then you can like proceed with doing stuff. So now, if you're not familiar with Documint, it's an awesome tool, but the way that you can learn it much faster is by understanding the little dance that happens between rows and columns. The first thing that you kind of need to know is that everything begins from a row. So if you're doing this from scratch, like we're doing this right now, the first thing you have to do is just drop a row in, or at least that's how I do it. Then I start thinking about columns. But the most important thing to note here is that it kind of works like a Russian doll, where you have things going into things, and into things. So in this case, we have a row. The next thing that we can add is a column within that row. Excellent. We can duplicate that column. And now the next thing to kind of like note for further down the line is that if you want to understand where you're at, so right now we have a column, we have another column, but there is a higher level, right? That row. You can press on this little arrow wherever you're kind of like basically selecting, and that will take you to the parent. And you can have basically unlimited children-parent relationships. But ultimately, it's really important to kind of like keep that in mind, that this arrow thing is key if you want to understand the structure of things. So yeah, let's begin building this out. So we have a logo, and then we have order confirmation, order, then a variable, date, and then a variable, and then there is a big thick line down there. So we have what we need. One thing that I would suggest is maybe in such cases where you have two things together, you see how we have a logo on the left and an order confirmation on the right. The way that I like to do this is that I actually have 3 columns. One column completely dedicated to the logo, one buffer column that adjusts the sort of distance between the logo and my text. Nothing goes in here, but it actually takes up that space, which is important. So let's drop in our image in there, and we can just pick an image. There we go. We're not going to make that image dynamic for now, but you could make it dynamic if you wish to. Next thing is dropping in our text. So I'm just going to pick my text up, and let's just call this, what was the exact term? Order confirmation. Excellent. And now we need to make it larger. So here I'm going to actually go down to size, and we're going to just make this quite a bit larger. I want this to be aligned to the right. And also I want to select all of this and like press Control B or Command B if you're on Mac, so that it kind of like makes it a little bit bolder. So the next thing that I want to do is basically duplicate this 3 times. Obviously, because I have order and order date. I'm a little bit lazy. I don't want to be dragging and dropping things. All I need to do is just change this to order number, right? No, it just says order. Now I'm just going to open up some brackets and just say order number. By the way, variables in Documint always are within 2 curly brackets. Just keep that in mind. This is a very basic thing. I'm going to unbold it. I'm going to make the size much smaller, so maybe like a 12 or something like that. And the same thing goes here. And this is going to be our date, curly brackets open, date, curly brackets close, unbold, make it smaller, 12. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to add that bar as I've done it over here. So how to do that? Well, we're going to use that arrow again. Let's select the parent, and this is the row. By the way, a nice little tip for anybody who was interested. The way that I kind of understand where I am, because sometimes it's not super clear, is by watching this little thing change. So right now we're in text. If I go to select the parent of this, which is going to be the column, you see that will immediately change because it opens up the properties of that parent. Now, I, of course, want the main row, and I'm clicking that one more time, and you can see now I'm in the row. So I'm going to go to the very bottom, and I'm going to create a border on the bottom end. I'm going to make the width 3 pixels wide, maybe 4. We'll see. Let's just click out of it. Yeah, that looks okay, but I think I want to make it a little bit thicker. And let's just make it 4 pixels so that it's a little bit bigger. Perfect. So now let's actually test this. And the goal here is to actually populate this with some data, fetch the file, and bring it back to Airtable. So here we go. Back to Make. I'm going to open up Documint, create a document, link this in. I'm going to find my template now. Here we go. That's our template. And immediately you can see how it's asking me for the order number and order date. Now, based on my doodle, I've got today's date. So what I need to do is I need to print the order number here, which I can fetch from module number 2, and then the order date. Now, that's today's date, but we want to format it nicely. So here's how you can do that. First thing that you need to do is use the function called format date. And since we want today's date, but prettier, I'm going to put now in the first part of our function. And in the second part, I'm just going to provide it with a format. So date, month, year. Otherwise, if you didn't use this format date function, it would actually print this sort of thing, which is a little bit ugly. So let's just print OK, and let's just run this. Let's actually see if Documint is doing its thing. And here we go. Let's open this up. So I'm just going to open this up in a new tab. And as you can see, it works perfectly fine. We've got the order number and we've got the date formatted nicely. So now I'm just gonna fill out the next section, this thing basically with the client details. That's basically the same process. And as soon as I've done that, we're gonna jump into discussing how to build loops so that we can actually have, this dynamic line item thing that we need to build here. So now that we know that we're printing properly, let's actually push that file back to Airtable so that we can close the loop, right? Because like I said, we want to build on strength and reach some kind of result as quickly as possible. And the last thing that's kind of left to achieve that goal is to actually bring the file back. So we're going to update the record. I'm basically choosing my base. Okay, and table, orders, order record ID. That is number 2's ID, module number 2's ID. Now I notice that there is actually no attachment field. So let's create that. Call this order pay attachment, create the field. Let's jump back into Make. Let's refresh our fields. Hopefully it should be there by now. And there we go. Add an item, file URL, grab the file URL from Documint, from module number 3. You can name it whatever you want. I'm just gonna leave it blank for now and run once so that we can actually test that not only does it generate the paperwork, but it actually brings it back to Airtable, which is what the user of this Airtable will want to have. And voila, we've got that same PDF that we just saw now in Airtable. So now that I've achieved this little bit, I'm gonna add the next section on my own, this client details thing, because it's essentially the same process. And I'm gonna catch you in the next section, which we're gonna be dealing with loops within Documint, which is one of the more complicated concepts, but it's actually not that complicated when you know what you're doing. So now that we've got the file in Airtable, let's continue building our document template. Next section is what client details. Okay, so here's how I will want to play this. I will grab this whole thing. I will grab the whole row and I'm gonna duplicate it. So that's a little bit easier for me to deal with. I'm just gonna clean it up. I'm gonna keep a 2-column layout. So I'm gonna delete the columns. I will also, because I want to achieve this little effect over here where I have the client details, and that's almost like its own row. Keyword there is its own row. And then as you can see, we have name, client name, phone, etc. This kind of looks like it's got 2 columns, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to grab a new row and place it just below, like over there. Perfect. And over here, we're going to drop another text. Perfect. Let's call this client details, just like the template, right? Client details. Let's make this the same size. Actually, you know what? Order confirmation probably can be bigger because that's the title of the document. And so we can keep this at 24, and maybe client details, we can actually have this at 19. There we go, something like that. Excellent. I then can delete this text, and then just maybe, because I'm a little bit lazy, I'm going to take this column and duplicate it. So grab the parent, there we go, column properties, and duplicate it. Now we're getting closer. So I'm going to take all of these texts and make sure that they're aligned to the left. There we go. Perfect. Now, the next thing to do is to actually create that static text variable combos as per the template. And we have name, client name, phone, email, client email, address, client address. Okay, so let's do that. Name, client name, phone, client phone. All right, template is ready. Now it's time to deal with make and essentially populating that template. So over here back in make, we have our payload that came from the order. As soon as you trigger it, we fetch the order details. And over here we have the client record ID. So it's really logical for us to now fetch the client's details because we want to populate that client section. So all we have to do is just get another record, and I'm just going to be clever here. I'm going to clone this and put it over here in the middle. I'm going to press the auto align button so that it's nice and neat. Jump back in, change the table to clients, and instead of the record ID from module number 1, which is essentially our record, which is essentially our order record ID, I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to press on this little drop down and then choose the first item from this client array field. I know that it's an array because it's got these, square brackets. So it's important to actually fetch the first one, or like the one that's within that drop down, basically. So now that we've got that, let's jump into Documint and refresh our template. Hopefully, we should see now the new variables that I've just added. Exactly, there they are. And now let's just start filling this in. So client name, client phone, and I'm using the tab button to kind of like choose the next field so that, I don't have to click too much. Email and client address, perfect. Press OK, run this once, and let's trigger it and see what happens. Uncheck, recheck. I'm going to clear this. And in theory, there we go. That is now running. We should now see the result. Perfect. Order confirmation, order number, the date, client details. Looks great to me. So now let's jump in to the line item loop and see how that whole thing goes. Okay, time to deal with the line items of this order confirmation. And it's actually very easy. There's really nothing to this. You just have to pay a little bit of attention. So here's the template. And let's break this down like we usually do. So we have order line items, and that we know is just a simple row. Kind of like the same concept as we had over here in client details, right? We created a whole new row just for that little title that we want to apply. Then we have like a column layout, I guess. Product, quantity, item price, item total, and then a dark bar. I mean, it's red now, but essentially it's going to be black, right? So think about it this way. If this is not going to change and it's just static text, it's no different to what we've done over here with the client details or the order confirmation. So let's build out that part. Now, the next section, as you can see, that's a little bit different because it's dynamic. In other words, you see there's even like a little note. This section is dynamic depending on the amount of items. So we can't just treat it like we treated the client details or the order confirmation stuff. So let's deal with the basics. First, order line items, the title, and then the headers of our little table. Super easy to do. Let's just copy this section, or let's actually not. I'm just gonna build it out from scratch. New row, here we go. Add some text. Let's call this order line items. Select all of it, make it bigger. Size is 19 and make it thicker. Then what I want to do is I want to probably just copy another section just for fun. So let's just pick this one. I think that's the row. Perfect. So I'm just going to clone it. I'm just going to bring the whole thing down. Excellent. Now what I need to do is I need to deal with my headers. And there's really not much to this, but the way that I suggest that you do it is the following. You see how I'm just leaving this one text and column in place? I'm just going to delete the other one. So also I'm just going to delete the column so that it's just there alone. Now I need to count how many headers I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do that. So we've got phone here. I'm just going to duplicate the column. So I don't want to duplicate the text. I want to duplicate the column, and that is important. So I'm choosing the parent. As you can see now, I've got the column essentially highlighted, and I'm just going to clone this once. I'm going to do this again. Column 2, 3, and one more. Excellent. So now I've got my columns ready. What I need to do is name them as per the template. We've got product, quantity, item price, item total. The next thing to do is to actually do a little bit of tidying up. And you see I'm choosing the column because the column I can kind of like resize and reposition. So I'm going to try and do that based on just my gut feel of how I want it to be. Yeah, something like that. Doesn't have to be super duper precise, as long as we're kind of close. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to bold these headers, just make them bolder. The next step is, of course, actually dealing with the loop. So it's time to deal with our loop of line items. And it's super easy. Here's how to do it. You see the one row that we've just created? Let's duplicate it. And I'm just gonna, again, select the parent, the row, and I'm just gonna duplicate this. Now, here, the next step is to replace the static hard-coded text with variables. So let's just call this product name, and I'm going to unbold it. Now, the next thing that I want to do is to actually specify that this whole row is a looped row. In other words, I'm going to have multiple items within this row. And to do that, you have to select the row itself. So let's jump to that level. Here we go. Row properties, edit logic, repeat loop, and let's call this line items and save. You can also add like a sort, but we're not going to do that right now. Just hit save. Let's jump back to make and refresh our document module. Hopefully we should now see that there is a new array that is called line items. Excellent. Just press OK for now. So the next step is to actually create that package of data for Documint. And we're going to be using an array iterator because we're going to fetch all of the related line items from the order. Then we're going to actually fetch the details of every item. And at the very end, we're going to use a custom array aggregator so that it actually will kind of fit within the parameters of Documint. You'll see what I mean. Let's get started. I'm going to use an iterator, and I'm going to put it kind of like over there between our order and like right after our client module, basically. I'm going to spread it out by using auto align iterator. This needs an array. Remember we talked about arrays and how you can kind of spot them very quickly by the square brackets? Well, here we go. we've got the order line items as they are being like featured within our order. Press OK. The next step is to actually fetch the details of that order line item, because even if you open this up and you see the stuff that is in that array right now, it's just record IDs. It's not telling me the price, the name of that item, it's telling me nothing really. So I want to find out more. And to do that, I'm going to clone one of these get a record modules, open this up, and now I'm going to actually change the table to order line items, get the record ID from my iterator, because that iterator kind of like works, again, in a loop. You feed it an array and it just iterates through the items of that array. In our case, the array contains 3 line items, number 1, number 2, number 3, this one. And the iterator basically takes one item at a time and passes it through to the next module or modules. Picking it up where we left off, I'm just going to map that record ID over here and I'm going to press OK. Now, it's really important to note that we have to close our loop, so to speak, here, because the iterator pushes these records one by one. And if you don't close it, you're going to do the rest of the path here 3 times because we have 3 items in that said array. So we're going to close that loop by introducing an array aggregator. And we're going to put it right here because our document actually needs that array over here. Essentially, this aggregator serves multiple functions. So I'm going to choose my source. The source is, of course, the iterator, number 6. And the target structure is the line items from module number 3. And you see, as soon as I choose that, I get my, so to speak, structure that I need to fill with data. So product name, product quantity, item price, item total. That gets fed directly from our little loop that we just created. So let's go ahead and fill this in with data. Now, a minor thing to note, as you can see right here, product name, for instance, that is something that doesn't really exist. And I can kind of like tell because product is an array. And if I open this up in my database, if I go to my order line items, product is essentially another link. So you have 2 options here. You can either kind of turn this into a name, or you can probably fetch it one more time. I'm just going to choose fetching it one more time here. So I'm just going to clone this particular module. And this is going to be my table of products now, because I'm going to fetch the product from that order line item. So here we go. Excellent. And now I'm just going to pre-fill all of this with the correct data. As you can see here with module number 9, that is our actual product. Is it? Well, I think it is. Actually, I'm not super sure. So if I'm not sure, I'm going to pre-fill everything up until that point. Let's pre-fill what we can. So quantity, item price, I can't really do that. And item total, so total price. Let's just fill that out. Now, the final step is, of course, to actually map that array. So let's jump into Documint and map this array that we can get from module number 8, the array aggregator. Press OK, and let's run this, see what happens. Uncheck, recheck. Excellent. And here we go. We have the quantities, 3, 5, and 2, and the item totals, but we're missing the item price and the product. Super easy. Let's jump back into Make, and now hopefully we should actually have the right data here because we've mapped everything correctly, obviously. So let's just jump back into the aggregator, map the product name, map the item price that we fetch from module number 9, press OK, run once, uncheck, recheck, and here we go. And this is perfect. We've got product 1, quantity 3, item price 11, total 33. And that's basically how you deal with a loop. All right, final stretch, final couple of modules that we are missing we're missing total price, and we're missing order notes. Super straightforward. Now I'm gonna show you a little trick, and this kind of like bears witness to the power of Documint. So Documint can actually perform functions for you. In other words, you don't have to deal with some of the functions that you can use in Make, or you don't have to like in orders to like sum up things and create new fields. You can do a lot of these operations within Documint. And yeah, all you really have to do is just jump into their help center. Let me just see, documentation, there we go, docs.documint.me, and let's just jump into data and variables, functions, and let's just use a very basic function called sum. Here we go. Now, how do we understand this? So we have some signatures, and to me, these are like examples, so to speak. So I'm interested in example number 3 because it kind of deals with that collection, path, and then format. So if you kind of look a little bit lower, you can see how this actually works. We have sum, and there's like a little $, then there's the space, then the array, the collection of records that we have, another space, and then the column that we want to sum up. Then if you click on data, you can see how that data actually looks like behind the scenes. And then of course, the result, 875.89, which is essentially summing up the price column, 160, 15, 699, and at the end you get the result. And that's exactly what we want with our little example here. Let's just create a column structure. I'm just going to use this 6633 and I'm going to drop it in. It's not exactly 6633, but doesn't matter. Let's just add a text in our leftmost column. Let's just call this total price. And then we're going to use that little trick. So open up our brackets, $, sum, space, and then the name of our array or loop, which is line underscore items, another space, and then the name of the column, which is item underscore total. Let's do that. And that goes into quote marks. And let's just close that off. Perfect. That looks great. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger and I'm going to make the total bold. Perfect. Let's try this out. So I'm going to run once, uncheck, recheck, and in theory, this should work. Here we go. Excellent. Let's see what it looks like. And it looks fine. We can see that it's a little bit off center. So let's just correct that. I'm going to choose my text and I'm just going to make sure that it's aligned to the right. Let's run that one more time just to double check, uncheck, recheck, and that should now be just fine. Here we go. That looks decent, much better. Okay, now let's deal with the last part of this document, which is order notes. Again, you can kind of see where this is going. We have a row, then we have another row, but we want to actually have it in like borders around the order notes. So let's go ahead and do that very quickly. One thing that I want to kind of like add here is that I want to potentially like have this towards the bottom of the document. So I'm just going to add a spacer there. Then let's add a row just below the spacer, add a piece of text, order notes, bold it, make it the same size as all the other headers. So 19, perfect. And let's just add yet another row. This time, of course, we need to add like some borders to it. So let's just scroll to the very bottom, click on the central thing, maybe make it 2 pixel thick, potentially. Yeah, that kind of looks all right. And drop in a piece of text in there. And we're just going to call this order underscore notes. Beautiful. Now, let's jump back into Make and add that final adjustment of order notes. Click refresh so we can fetch that order notes variable that we've just created. And now all we have to do is just basically map the order notes. Here we are, order comments, map that in, press OK. Don't forget to save your scenario. That's one thing that I kind of forgot to mention across this video. So let's just run this, uncheck, recheck, and hopefully everything should be fine. Here we go. Beautiful. Okay, so now that we've set this up, let's run one final test. I'm gonna run once, and I'm gonna uncheck and recheck. Clear the other paperwork. Let's check this out. Okay, I don't know if you can notice, but there is a bit of an issue here. We have order line items, we have the headers, but for some dumb reason, the line items just decided to vanish. They're just not there. Good news is that order notes are there now, and they look very good, but the loop doesn't seem to work, and of course the total price is missing as well. And this happens occasionally when you're working with Documint. It will just decide for some reason to stop considering loops as loops. And if we jump into our document templates, there's nothing wrong with it. So if we go up to the row properties, you can see that the loop is still there and it's all good. There is a little telltale sign that something's off, and you can see that here line items is now just text, which is problematic. So how to fix this issue? Well, it's kind of easy. Edit the logic and make a minor change to the line items. Let's just say it's line items 1 and press save. That should refresh Document's brains. And if we go back to our document template, let's just refresh it as well. And you can see now how line items, the old line items, is kind of still there. We're just gonna delete that array, but we have line items 1, and that is now an array type of field. Let's just map our array back to what it was before. And let's not forget to actually jump into our array aggregator and actually say that this is line items 1, right? Everything's still mapped. Great. Let's press OK and let's run this one more time. Uncheck, recheck, and hopefully now everything should work perfect. Well, actually no. The total price still doesn't show up. And I know, of course, what the problem is. You see here, we reference the loop that we created, and I forgot to actually call it line items 1. So now let's do another test to make sure that this is all okay. I'm trying to click out of this so that I can have the save changes thing happen. There we go. Let's run make and uncheck, recheck. Let's open this up. And it all looks perfect, finally. So yeah, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this little guide. If you want to see more guides for other platforms, please let me know down in the comments below, and I'll do my absolute best to keep everybody happy. That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.